Alright, so welcome everyone in our beautiful museum at Rembrandt House. My name is Angelito and I will guide you through this house. Before we actually start, I want to start with something kind of boring, or quote-unquote boring. There are just some rules in this house. Our art, for example, is unprotected. There's nothing withholding you for actually touching the art, except for the alarms that will go off. So you can actually stand very close to our art and our collection. But the thing is, if you get too close, then someone from security is going to get an alarm in their system and then they come to us. So please mind the art, so maybe take a step back from it. And there are a few chairs that you'll see, such as these ones in the museum. These chairs that are quite old and they will not withstand your weight probably. So we're not going to sit in any of these. And yeah, that's about it. And so now we're going to start with the tour itself. Welcome to the historical kitchen. The very first thing that a few of you already noticed I saw was very weird thing in the kitchen, right? I think, or I suppose, I hope, I'm not judging if you do, but I think most of you don't have an actual bed in the kitchen. Does anyone know why there was a bed in the kitchen?
For heat.
Yeah, so one of the things, this is kind of a weird bed. In Dutch we call it a bed stay, which is just a box bed, a bed literally in a closet. And this was to, well, keep heat inside indeed. But the main reason why there is kind of a weird place, so who do you think was actually sleeping in this bed?
Servants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So most of the times I actually applaud you. Most of the times I hear, oh, the wife of Rembrandt was probably sleeping in the kitchen. I'm very glad that I didn't hear that just now, because that was definitely untrue. Rembrandt, his wife Saskia, their children, you could actually never find in this room right here. This was the room for the servant. And that servant was indeed sleeping here. In the 17th century, there were no separate bedrooms. So that's why you kind of see beds or box beds in kind of awkward places, such as the kitchen. And it was just the perfect place for a servant to sleep.
He sure was paid.
Yeah.
Just to have your own.
Exactly.
That means you were getting paid.
My mom's gonna go sit. She can't.
Oh, really, eh?
Yeah, she can't do it.
Stuff here. Take your time.
You're gonna take it. Or you gonna...
I'm videoing it for her so that way she can see it.
You go ahead.
All right.
So was this when he did all of his work? So where did he get his money to have a house like this?
Well,
Yeah, Mom, there's no way you would have been able to do this.
Commissions, right? So,
Well, I'm sure you could have, but it would have been fun.
affluent rich of Amsterdam, and you heard, say, the McKinsey family.
Well, where did he live before here?
He lived in a town called Leiden, which is outside.
You know what
He
I
came from a very
Or did he force to sell his house and move around house too?
I'm sorry.
What was the name of the town?
Leiden. Leiden, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Enrolled at the University of Leiden. This
Just,
is the whole timeline.
University of Leiden is actually a very prestigious school, even in the Netherlands, but also worldwide known. It was, well, I just have to quickly kill time since I see that my colleague isn't there yet. So let's go into, well, literally the timeline of Rembrandt. Rembrandt, most people actually think that he was born in Amsterdam, but as you probably already read, he came from Leiden. He was born and raised in Leiden, which is also where he went to school, which is a very important thing to note, because Rembrandt was able to read and he was able to write, which was a privilege in the 17th century. Not everyone could afford to go to school. Unfortunately, Rembrandt did not finish his university in Leiden, because we don't, well, when we think of Rembrandt, we think of the painter, and that's where his passion was. And so he quickly quit school and he went to his first master in Leiden as well, who taught him most of the things that you could about art. And Rembrandt had a second master, which we will see in just a second, or some of his work, which was Peter Lasman, and that was in Amsterdam. Around 6 months he went into an internship or apprenticeship with Peter Lasman, and then he went back to Leiden and he had his first workshop or workroom in Leiden. He gathered kind of a lot of fame already, and he quickly saw that Leiden became way too small for him, and so he was already in Amsterdam. He saw how big Amsterdam was, and Amsterdam in the 17th century was growing at a very, very rapid pace, and there was a lot of money going around in Amsterdam too. And so Rembrandt wanted to jump in on that money, and so he moved to Amsterdam eventually, And he first worked and lived at the place where we all started, where we all put our jackets away. That used to be a workshop from Hendrik Eulenburg. Hendrik Eulenburg's workshop you could actually see as kind of a portrait factory. All of the rich people of Amsterdam would go to Hendrik Eulenburg's workshop and they would get a portrait done of them. Now Rembrandt started to work and live there, and as a very young, ambitious and very talented young man, he quickly rose the ranks and became the head of that workshop. And he met a woman at the workshop as well, Saskia Eulenburg, literally the niece of Hendrik Eulenburg, who we eventually started to marry and started a family with. And the Eulenburg family, they were quite powerful themselves. The Eulenburg family, they had a high-ranking judge in Friesland. It's northern of the Netherlands. And so they had a lot of influence as well. Now you have Rembrandt, a very ambitious painter, and then you have the Eulenburg family, who were also very, very ambitious and very successful. And as a successful young couple, they became very powerful and they wanted to buy a house that fitted that narrative. And so they eventually bought this house that we're standing in right now. And the house costed them around 13,000 guildens, which is back to euros, around 1.9 million euros. Which 1.9, almost 2 million euros, it's a lot of money for us right now. But imagine 17th century, that used to be a whole lot of money. They didn't have 2 million or 13,000 guildens just laying around, so they did it in parts, in 4 parts. Eventually, as you probably, you will hear from me later, they were not able to successfully buy off this house, and they had to move out of this house as well. Now you'll quickly start to notice why this house was so expensive. The same designer that designed this house, designed the palace on the Dam. So, Paleis op de Dam. Have you been to the Dam already?
Not yet.
No? Okay, so there's a very big palace on Dam Square, and he designed the same house that you're standing in right now as well. I see that my colleague is gone, so please follow me to the front room.
Yeah, my mom was not able to join us, so I'm gonna try to be near the front and out of people's way, but where I can still.
Where's Leiden?
Leiden. It's more southern west of the Netherlands. But
Okay.
It's in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Rembrandt, he never left the Netherlands.
Okay. Thank you.
And you said we could touch the art.
No, please don't.
Very shiny.
Yeah, good thing to know, if artists in between 50 to 100 years old, they start to fade in color and the paint will start to crack. So if you see in painting that's older or around 50 to 100 years, they definitely have seen restoration.
Yeah, I can see it without 100%.
Alright.
Is this little office over here, that was Rembrandt's sort of study?
Yeah, that literally was his office where he did administration, but we only found 4 letters. So he probably either did not do his administration or he was very bad at it. Maybe a big reason why he also lost the house eventually. Alright, so I heard a few reactions already when we walked in this room. It was very impressive, and that was the point of this room as well. This room and the room next door were the 2 public rooms that were open for everyone to just walk in. And so we imagined that Rembrandt also put up his and other paintings, as you can see right now, the same way as we did right here, because this was not only just the very first room that you saw, you could also see this as the store of Rembrandt. Rembrandt was not only a painter himself, he was also a paint dealer or a dealer of art. And so he would not only sell his own paintings, he would also sell art of other people. And so you can see the big door over on this side, way larger than the door that we saw underneath in the kitchen. This door was there to impress. It's a very nice and big door, and it stands for wealth, right? You can see the ceiling is quite high as well, and beautiful large windows over on this side. we didn't have, unfortunately, no lights back then, and so the big windows over on this side, there was no big building in front either. So when the sun was shining, it was a very beautiful display of all of these paintings that you can see around here. Now we have something weird on the left side of me. This is what we call a soldier. It's kind of a stage, a wooden stage with literally just a chair on top of it. Now there was no television in the 17th century, but there was. You walked outside already, right? You went a little tour. There was a lot happening outside, and so you could sit here and just look outside. Amsterdam was, as I already mentioned, rapidly growing, and as we know Amsterdam right now, very diverse, a lot of ethnicities, a lot of religions walking around. In the 17th century, it was no different. And so you could see a lot happening, rich walking in between poor people and different religions, different ethnicities. And so that's why we have a stage, or a wooden stage right here, which you could just watch outside like you're watching television. Now, I talked about Rembrandt's second master, Peter Lasman. Peter Lasman, we have a painting right on the upper right side, which is called The Crossing, the Kruisiging. And Peter Lasman, as you can see, he was a historical and a biblical painter. Peter Lasman always tried to tell a story inside of his paintings, and so you can see, even if you were not able, didn't know what the crossing actually was, you could actually tell from the paintings that he created. And so the story actually goes, when Jesus got crossed, it was a beautiful clear day, and then a storm of clouds befell on the land, and there was no light. Actually, it was completely dark. Now we see that there's one kind of sun ray shining on the crossing itself, and this is what we call the play of the chiaroscuro, or the play on light and dark. So if Peter Lasman actually created the exact story with just darkness, we wouldn't actually see anything. And so this is actually one of the few paintings that Peter Lasman used the chiaroscuro, or this play on light and dark. And Rembrandt, he saw the potential in the chiaroscuro, and he actually made it display. Oh, that is one of the alarms for the candle alarm. We know Rembrandt as a master painter, a Baroque master painter, and he really, really knew the ins and outs of the chiaroscuro, the play on light and dark. And he got it from Peter Lasman. Now, Peter Lasman himself, he went outside of the Netherlands, he went to Italy to experience the Renaissance for himself. And Rembrandt, weirdly enough, he never left the Netherlands. He always stayed within our own borders. Now I want to take you to the next room while our colleague... Oh, they're going up. Okay.
Oh, another box bed.
Yes. This one looks larger, but it actually isn't. The right side is just storage. So it's still small. So what you're seeing right now, most of you are taking pictures of, is the old man. This is a copy that one of his students at the time created. The original one hangs in Portugal, if I'm not mistaken. I'm waiting for everyone to walk in.
These museums and open up some office. Throw them over the paintings. Happened in the Louvre.
And how would
It
you
happened
be
there
able
in Amsterdam as well, in the
Yeah.
Rijksmuseum. They
Yeah.
throw paint and
There's a lot of, there's a good question. You'll see some of the paintings some will have a little thin plane of glass in it, that's just for protection. But obviously over time, oil paintings would never have a cover. They drive through oxidation. But because of a lot of activists coming in and using these world-renowned paintings as a means to make a public statement. So they would throw paint on that happened in the Louvre, it's happened in the Rijksmuseum. So that's why the guy was saying that they don't want people carrying bags. He was a small bag, carry little,
soup cans,
Yeah.
for example.
Carry on, sorry to interrupt.
And also just for us, yeah, if you have a big bag and it's kind of loose like this, you turn around and we don't have protection, right? So it's very easy to knock over something. Luckily, it hasn't happened in, well, I haven't seen it happen yet, but prevention is always better than
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we're at a side room. So we've come from the front room, now we're in the side room, the Zijdelkamer, literally called the side room. Yeah, of course. You can take pictures, by the way, as long as there's no flash. This is the second public room open for everyone to just walk in. Now we see another box bed. This is not the room that Rembrandt himself was sleeping in. This is where his business relations, family, friends would stay the night. And if you look around you, the paintings themselves are very different from the paintings that we were seeing just a second ago. These are a whole lot more personal, right? We see a lot more what we call tronies, which is, a trony means face. So we see a lot more portraits, a lot more personal paintings. And Rembrandt, he made, I can actually show you this on iPad. Yes.
I like that.
So Rembrandt was a man who, well, maybe loved himself a lot, and he created a lot of selfies. He created a lot of self-portraits. Now, Rembrandt was a very realistic painter, and he wanted to master the art of painting humans, painting faces, expressions, and emotions. Now you can imagine if I wanted to be a master of wanting to paint emotions and faces, I had to practice, right? Now I could practice on a model. If I wanted to ask any of you to be a model for me, you guys wanted to be paid, you needed vacation days, you wanted to eat at night with your family, and this would all, well, not be very good for me because I wanted to paint in my own time. So what did Rembrandt do? Instead of hiring someone to be a model for him, he hanged up a mirror, he looked himself in the eye, and then he started to paint himself. He did a lot of expressions, so we can see. This one is actually a funny one. This is the very first duck face of the world, probably. 17th century duck face. It was very popular in the 2000s. Then we've got one of my favorite self-portraits that Rembrandt created in etching. This is the B12 where Rembrandt, this is the largest, okay. Very confident. This is where Rembrandt was on top of his game and was very, very famous, very wealthy, and you can actually see that in his expression. Now we have a very angry Rembrandt. And this is just to show you that Rembrandt not only made a lot of self-portraits, but also did a lot of different facial expressions and tried different things to master emotions and painting people. Laughing Rembrandt.
All that money and he couldn't afford a comb.
Ja, we gaan hier naar links.
All right. I'm sorry, I'm trying to be in the front because my mom can't be here. I'm still videoing it for her. We follow you?
Ja,
Okay.
we gaan this way.
Oh wow. Stunning. This one might fit in my suitcase.
Sorry?
This might fit in my suitcase. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
No?
There are even smaller ones, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome in the zaal. This is the living room / the bedroom of Rembrandt and Saskia. Now you have heard say Saskia a few times, that used to be the wife of Rembrandt, and we see a lovely painting right behind me. This painting is of Saskia Eilenberg. Now again, Rembrandt and Saskia, when you walked inside of this room, you got a whole different feel than what we just saw. The room right here is a whole lot more cozy. We see a lot more warmer colors, and that had to be done because this was, the living room and the bedroom of Rembrandt. We see a beautiful fireplace over on this side, and you can imagine that Rembrandt and Saskia experienced a lot of happiness in this room. Them sitting in front of the fireplace with family and friends, and maybe the children playing behind them. But unfortunately for Rembrandt and Saskia, they also experienced a lot of sadness and a lot of loss in this same room. You heard me tell that I talked about children, right? Saskia and Rembrandt, as a successful couple, they wanted to start a family. They wanted children themselves. Unfortunately, the very first 3 children that they conceived, they kind of died at birth, stillborn, or died very fast after. The 4th child, called Titus, a son, he is actually one of the few ones that of the children that they conceived who experienced adulthood. Now Titus was named after Saskia's sister called Titia, and Saskia, again, painting behind me. This is Saskia. This isn't the original one. This is one of a copy of. Oh, that's me. A copy of that one of his students created. Now I have a picture of the original one on my tablet right here, and then you can maybe tell me the big differences that you see. Maybe if I
You
hold
can
the
see
light.
the lights
And
also
the
on the
lights
arm.
on light
Exactly.
and dark.
So the clair-obscur, right? The play on light and
Yeah.
dark. It's almost as if there's a spotlight hanging in above Saskia, and this. Wow. The feather is also very different. The feather is a lot more vibrant.
Shirt is closed.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of good things already. First of all, the clair-obscur.
Necklace and so on.
The necklace, indeed. The clair-obscur, the play on light and dark. Saskia is really the middle of this of the painting. She's really what you have to focus on. Now, the student of Rembrandt probably wasn't as good with the clair-obscur as Rembrandt was, and that you can see. Now, I've heard that the feather is a lot more vibrant or white on the original one than it is on the copy. Now, when I zoom in, indeed, we see a beautiful collar, a beautiful closed collar with nice beautiful necklace. Now, Rembrandt, how did he see his wife? He saw his wife as a very prestigious, elegant woman. His student probably didn't think the same of her, and he saw this collar and he was, it's way too difficult for me, it's way too intricate. Maybe I'm just gonna give her an open collar. I don't see her as the same elegant woman as you see her, so I'm gonna give her an open collar with much less beautiful jewelry on top of it. Now, one thing that's actually very difficult to notice, when I zoom in on her face, we see a few differences too. So in the 17th century, and even actually now, if you have social medias and you want to post a picture, and the picture can be landscapes or just a picture of yourself, you can always tweak it a little bit. You can always Photoshop it just a tiny bit. In the 17th century, you could ask your painter to Photoshop as well. If you had a double chin, or if your nose wasn't as straight, you could always, or if your ears, right, was a little bit more outward, you could always ask your painter to Photoshop it away, make you just a little bit more beautiful. Now Rembrandt, he would never do this. He would, if you were unhappy with your portrait, he would hold a mirror in front of you and tell you, this is exactly how you look like. Now this can be maybe the rudeness of the Netherlands, right, how Dutch people are, but he had a very beautiful philosophy behind it too. His philosophy was, everyone has been created the way that they've been created, and everyone is beautiful in their own way. And even his wife Saskia, he wouldn't Photoshop. And this is just to show you that he just wouldn't do it. When we zoom in on Saskia's face, we can see that Saskia has a double chin. When we look at the nose, it wasn't as nice and beautiful straight as the painter behind me did.
Lips too.
And the lips are way thinner. In the painting behind me, she had maybe a little bit of a filler. And in the original one, she definitely didn't. I want to take you upstairs.
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry.
We're going to shots of stairs up.
Okay.
Flights of stairs.
Can you imagine if you forgot something upstairs and had to go downstairs and get it?
That's why you had the maid.
Yeah.
Now I get it.
We have to wait as you boys' rooms are occupied right now.
Which one are you going to go to first?
Whichever goes.
Beautiful stairs.
Kids will love it.
Yeah.
Will we go into the etching room?
Yeah, upstairs. The etching room is there.
But will we go into this room?
No, that one's too small for. But we have another etching room upstairs.
I want to take some of the guests in to see this because that's really important.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
We can go there.
Yeah. So, Clark, you're just gonna come back down and just go into this room just for a sec.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
See.
Wait, I gotta set her out.
Trying to sell the etchings, that's what.
Yes, yes, yes.
Vintage art here and at the museum versus
Yeah, so I know know a lot more about etchings.
Okay.
Oh, you're gonna have that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Every other person.
Yeah, why don't we take
One
it back?
interesting fact that I'd like to share with everybody on some of the
Sorry, thank you.
across the room, you'll actually see some of the actual plates. Now, in some cases, these are just actual replica of plates. But I think that's something that's going to be exciting for everyone to see in a moment when we go up and see the press. We often talk about the gouffage, which is the actual deep impression of the plate pushing into the actual copper. And you can quite visibly see it in a lot of these impressions. A lot of the Rembrandts that you're just seeing on display, for example, the sleeping puppy and the seashell. The seashell actually quite recently, I'm going to share with you guys a little later tonight, is another piece that actually came up quite recently at auction. The actual original seashell etching itself
Feels
is quite a bit smaller than that. That's
textured like honeycomb.
For today's display. But also hit another record. But
Not good.
yeah, I wanted everyone just to have a look and see this because it's
smell
really
like
cool
an
to actually
ocean?
see some of the
No.
plates and the landscapes.
Feel free to take away.
Majority of Rembrandts, in terms of etchings, as you'll see a
My
lot of
sense of
the
smell's not good. That's not good.
self-portraits. Another big thing that he became very famous for, obviously, was religious scenes, is the genre scenes that you're seeing depicted as over here, and then a few of his landscapes, which are also considered extremely rare. But wanted everybody to have a look at this. This is amazing. I'm sure. Is there anything else that you want to add, man?
Yeah, I actually got to ask a question just a second ago. For etching, the museum at Rembrandt Huis, we owe around 75% of the original etching plates, so the copper plates that you see right here. Another around 20% are either are probably at the Rijksmuseum, and 5% are either lost, broken, or in hands of collectors.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
So
And you're actually able to see some original plates as well. We have them for display in the etching room.
Why does the plate over there, why does it have a smell it thing? Why is there a weird place to smell it?
Yeah, so some things you can actually smell, but this is, this. Which one are you talking about again?
Over here.
Smell.
Yeah, and you smell it, it's not pleasant.
No, yeah. No, that's the smell of what those windmills were actually smelling like. And so it was very unpleasant.
Okay, the windmill. All right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I'm gonna
Smell of
quick,
antiquity.
I'm gonna quickly see if the room upstairs is free already.
So one thing that's also awesome while we're going to be going up, we'll wait and he'll give us the green light to go up, folks. But something that's pretty exciting, talking about the copper plates. So one of the big questions that was asked, which is a very good question, is the copper plates. At one point in history, remember that the entire Rembrandt copper plate inventory, when he actually declared bankruptcy because he lived a very ostentatious life, he collected a lot of curiosities. But on the time of him actually losing his wife, losing his 3 children, he sat into a deep depression and obviously lost everything. He declared bankruptcy. But it was actually his lawyer, or an attorney, that was able to prove in a court of law that the actual copper plates were deemed tools of trade, so that they didn't go into the liquidation, okay, which is huge. Another big thing to remember is at one point in time, all of the actual plates came up for sale. There were about 81 to 82. And there's a very wealthy lawyer, or doctor I should say, his name is Dr. Robert Lee Hammer from Raleigh, North Carolina, who actually purchased all of those plates, and at one point in history, all 81 of the existing plates of Rembrandt were in Raleigh, North Carolina. Pretty amazing, right? When he passed away, his heirs, obviously, what do you think they did? They sold them off and brokered the deals to the highest bidders around the world. So as the gentleman was saying, a large inventory of copper plates are owned by the Rijksmuseum. Many of them are in private collections. Park West Gallery owns 8 copper plates, which we have loaned to the Raleigh, North Carolina Museum. So if you travel to that museum, you can see 8 of those plates that are currently on the display. One of them is the Raising of Lazarus, the self-portrait of Rembrandt at the window, the portrait of his mother, the cow in the landscape is another very famous piece, the man with the flat cap. And then, of course, there's another 3 that is owned by the gallery. The natural next question you're probably going to ask is, well, why don't we go ahead and pull some more from those plates? So the question is, ultimately, if they were to even try to do that, the risk of those plates cracking and the dollar amount of what those plates represent would far exceed the loss of what you would even be able to sell that for, right? So that's an important point. So tonight we'll be showcasing some Rembrandts, but you'll be seeing Rembrandt from 17th century, and then the majority of Rembrandt etchings exist as we record posthumous impressions, meaning after Rembrandt passed away, there were master printmakers that would pull from those plates in the 18th century and even in the 19th century. And obviously, depending on when they were pulled, we'll obviously showcase quality, scarcity, and obviously the impression. So just a little bit of additional history since we're here. It's pretty cool, and you'll see that upstairs. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah. They just left.
Those big section, I know, right?
It's a good tour.
In December last year.
Do a little quicker version because there's
Yeah, understood.
Like I think this room going to be really interesting. I heard that you guys are collectors.
Yes.
Yeah?
This is the curiosities, right?
Like this collecting room?
Yes.
Sorry.
I was wondering the way I was trying to hide from you.
No, no.
I know you're trying to. No, it's for your mom. And
Yeah.
she wants to enjoy it, right? You don't want my ugly face in it.
Yeah, she has a few Rembrandt, so it's nice to. She was really hoping to be able to do this, but it would be too much. Interesting.
This is cool. I love this.
Oh, yeah.
So as I probably already expected, this is going to be the most exciting room for you guys. I heard that you are all collectors, right? And so this is Rembrandt's antiquities room, or his collector's room, his private collection. And you can, if you're leaning too much forward over there, then that is good. So this is actually where most of Rembrandt's money went. Rembrandt was a collector. He was not only a painter. Oh, there you go. No problem. Rembrandt, he was not only a painter himself, he was not only a dealer of art, he was also a collector. And this is literally where most of his monies went to, as our tour guide already mentioned.
Then you become
After his wife and children died, that same year he finished the night watch and he went into grieving. Of course, when he went into grieving because his wife died and all of the loss of his children, he painted a lot less for contractors, a lot less for other people, and he painted a lot more for himself. And this wasn't good for money flow, right? There was not a lot of money going in and a lot of money going out to all that you see around you. And Rembrandt, we call it in Dutch having a hole in your wallet. Everything that he didn't know from the Netherlands or just things that he saw for the first time, he needed to get in his collection. And so he started to borrow money from other people. He started spending a lot more money that he didn't have. And eventually those people, they wanted the borrowers, they wanted their money back. Now Rembrandt, he was not able to finance this. And he kept on buying all of the rarities and antiquities that you see. And eventually that led to his bankruptcy. So this right here that you see around you is a big reason why he went bankrupt. Now why does Rembrandt have all of this? Again, Rembrandt, he was a very realistic painter. And he didn't just paint from his imagination. He needed to see everything in front of him before he started to paint. And so you can see a lot of harness, a lot of helmets, a lot of weapons, a lot of sculptures as well. We see Julius Caesar. And I quickly glance over to the next room. I think I'm just gonna ask them if they are.
guys, while we're waiting on the gentleman, something I wanted to share with, he's doing a great job, but I always want to pick up on something. If you look to the back over here, folks, you'll see a lot of these big arch files. Rembrandt obviously collected things from all over the world, but one of the big things that he actually collected as well, he actually purchased a lot of the Albrecht Dürer original woodcuts and engravings, because much like every great master artist, they study artists before them. So that was quite a big thing, and Dürer was the first ever to actually hire salespeople to travel through Europe and sell his prints. And Rembrandt, obviously being a scholar and a student of the arts, you can actually see in one of those folders on the bottom left there, obviously that's just a replica, but you can actually see an image of an Albrecht Dürer on the bottom left that's being showcased. So it's always important just to see that, because all great artists study the arts before.
We're going to the following room, gonna do a switch.
It's reconstructed after the drawing Rembrandt made.
All these names we still use, ultramarine, burnt amber, gold sienna, all these names we still use.
This is the drawing by the way. This is the drawing.
And we swap now with the other group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a nice light.
Yes. Very good.
They come out.
All right. Welcome to the very exciting part of this, the guide. We're finally in Rembrandt's atelier, or Rembrandt's workshop. This is where Rembrandt created most of his paintings. I already heard, when you walk in this room, you see a lot of light. It was very, very important. We have windows, and this is also very important if you want to paint yourself or if you love plants. We have windows that are facing the northern side. Now, do you guys know why this is important for a painter or for a plant lover? To have northern-facing windows?
East to west.
Yes, exactly. This is if you have northern-facing windows, you have the most light throughout the day, because the sun sets up and it goes down instead of setting up right here, and then you don't have any light for the rest of the day or half of the day. So northern-facing windows is very important. You can see that there's a cloth that was hanging right in front of those windows, and we still kind of use this technique today. If you ever had a photo shoot or if you ever are on a film studio,
Diffuse
there's
light.
still exactly a big lamp or big lights with a white cloth that kind of diffuses and distributes the light evenly throughout the room. Hopefully I can find the painting that Rembrandt created. We know, yeah. So we have a painting of this exact corner right here that Rembrandt created. And so we know that, that his canvas, as it's displayed right here, was also facing this way. Now this is going to be a little trickier of a question. Since we know that his canvas was facing this side, we also know whether Rembrandt was left or right-handed. Do you know why? Or can you see the light?
Because your hand would be blocking the light as you're,
Exactly.
yeah.
So we know that Rembrandt was right-handed, because if he was left-handed, a shadow would be cast on the spot that he would be working on.
Interesting.
Now, if he was right-handed, there still will be a shadow cast, but it's on the opposite side, so it's not in my way anymore.
Yeah.
So if he was left-handed, the canvas would be faced over on this side. Now I want you to actually stand around here, and now we're going to look at the beautiful ways that paint is created. Unfortunately, we're not going to actually create paint today. But what you see right in front of you, these were pigments, right? So nowadays, if you want to paint, and painting can take many forms, it can be in an artistic way, painting a painting, or just very simply painting a house. I think most of you probably, painted a house, or tried to paint a house, or helped someone with painting a house. It's very easy to get paint nowadays, right? We just walk into a hobby shop, a do-it-yourself shop, and you'll find immense amount of colors, different kinds of colors coming in ready to go aluminum tubes, which if you want to paint, you just squeeze out and you can start. Now, in the case of painting a house, we can buy literal buckets. In the 17th century, it wasn't as easy. There were no shops outside who would grain paint for you, let alone sell this, right? So if you wanted to be a painter in the 17th century, you had to craft or handcraft everything yourself by hand. And so these are pigments. These are colors that Rembrandt created paint out of, or pigment, powder, very fine powder. And these come from all over the world. These are all natural elements that you can just find. Of course, there were way more pigments around, but this is just what Rembrandt himself used. Now, how would you create paint? You would grab just a bit of this pigment, put it on top of a nice and flat surface, add a little bit of linseed oil, and then you grind them together until it's a fine and smooth paste. Now, why linseed oil in specific? Why linseed oil in particular? I often get the question, why don't we, because we still use either linseed oil or a kind of a nut oil, walnut oil, for example. Why do we still use these kinds of oils, and linseed oil in particular, right? Why not any other cheaper, sunflower oil, for example, more accessible olive oils? And this is because any other oil would not be able to harden. So if I give you the difference between a water paint and an oil paint, water is able to evaporate into air, so water dries. Oil, it doesn't matter how long I let it sit in a boil, it's not able to evaporate into air, so oil paint never really dries. Now you look at this dry paint, it definitely looks dry, but I just told you that it's unable to dry, so oil paint is indefinitely wet indefinitely actually. Now why does it look dry? I actually already heard you explain it already. The beautiful thing about linseed oil is that, as you can see, fresh linseed oil, it's quite fluid, and it has a chemical reaction with oxygen. So that means it oxidizes, a little bit of heat from the sun and a lot of oxygen. When we expose it to those, a chemical reaction would start to occur, and as you can see, that exact same linseed oil is going to start to change in viscosity or its thickness, right? It's a lot more honey-like or a lot more syrup-like right here. And eventually, mixed with your pigments, it would harden. So again, doesn't dry, but it would harden. Now the unfortunate or the drawback of this process is this process never really stops. So as we're speaking, this gets harder and harder. And so after around 50 years to 100 years, your oil paint will get so hard, and it hardens and hardens that it will start to crack, and then it starts to crumble. And also, because these are natural elements, having natural different characteristics and properties, the colors itself will start to fade away too. And so if you see a painting that's older than 50 years, most of the time they've already seen or they soon need a restoration. Now, I'm going to go over some of these pigments right in front of me. Not all of them, just some important ones. I'm not sure, I forgot to actually point this out, but at the painting of Peter Laswan with the crossing, you on the left side, we have a woman who is always in blue, and that is Virgin Mary. And Virgin Mary always gets a very special blue. She always gets this blue right in my hands right here. Does anyone know what kind of blue is always used for Virgin Mary?
Cerulean?
The lapis lazuli, yes.
Oh.
So this right here is the lapis lazuli, and it gives ultramarine blue. Now, ultramarine blue was the most expensive pigment that you could find, right? Very, very, very expensive. It was literally worth more than gold. And a big reason why you will not see it in a lot of 17th century paintings, because not a lot of people could afford it. Now, since it was so expensive, it was also seen as prestigious, and it had a second name. We also called ultramarine blue heavenly blue. It was so expensive, so prestigious, that it was associated with the color of heaven, which is also why it was only reserved for very important historical as well as biblical figures. Kachik, wacht jij op mij? Of, Nee. Oh, okay. Now, another, by the way, kind of cool fact about ultramarine blue. It comes from the lapis lazuli. It originally comes from Afghanistan, so from Asia. Now imagine there were no airplanes, no trains, so it was kind of difficult to get this stone imported to the Netherlands. So usually it came per boat all the way around Africa to the Netherlands, which is why it got the name ultramarine blue. So ultramarine is Latin for ultramare, which means over the sea. Now this stone literally had to travel all the way across the sea to get to the Netherlands, for example, which is why it had the name ultramarine blue, or over the seas blue. Now the next pigment, or dye, definitely is not my favorite, but it kind of is my favorite one to talk about, because it's a crowd shocker. right? We still use this specific pigment every single day in all-day kind of objects, such as your clothing. Think about your wool, textile, fabrics. Think about cosmetics. Your lipstick, your blushes, your eyeshadows, everything that's red to pink comes from this pigment right here. But we also consume it. It's also a food coloring dye. So in the Netherlands, we have a pink cake known as rozenkoeken. We have a pink drink, kind of a yogurt drink, known as fristies. But you're probably more familiar with red M&Ms, red Skittles, red wine gums, the Haribos, something pink, a strawberry yogurt, for example, which strawberry yogurt actually does not contain a lot of strawberries, but a lot more of this pigment to give that a beautiful, vibrant pink color. Now this red/pink is known as carmine red. Now what is so shocking about carmine red? In order for me to get carmine red, I need to get my hands on these little things right here. Now, does any one of you already have a clue, or maybe already know what I'm holding right now?
Looks like poop.
It's not poop, but it holds poop in them. Bugs. Did someone say bugs? No. They're insects. Exactly. They're bugs, insects. I can show a picture on my tablet. They're called the cochineal, which is a kind of a beetle, a parasitic species living on cacti. So think about Central to South America. And these beetles, they get hand-picked. They only, weirdly enough, need the female beetles. The female beetles have something within their bodies which is known as carbonic acid, which their male counterpart does not possess.
Huh.
Now I'll show you what those beetles look like.
So that's breadfruit now?
Yes. So these are, you can see them, they're white shell, right? This is why they only need the female beetles. When you pick one of these female beetles, you squeeze them, they release that carbonic acid, giving that vibrant red and pink coloring. And I have a picture of someone squeezing them as well. Yes, right here. So it's not the blood is part of it, but it's primarily that carbonic acid which gives it that red food coloring.
Interesting.
Now, a very good thing to know, if something is within a product, it needs to be included in the ingredient list, right? Now, if I go to a supermarket, I buy strawberry yogurt, I turn it around, and I read dried up, crushed up beetles or insects, I probably wouldn't buy strawberry yogurt, right? But it has to be there, right? So, are we going to put dried up, squished beetles? No, we're going to hide it behind very big names. So we're going to hide it behind the scientific name, either carminic acid, carmine red food coloring, or just the word carmine, or natural food colorings, because insects, they're
It's all natural.
It's natural.
That's pretty funny.
So just for fun, any of you come from Europe? No? Okay, so in Europe we like to hide it even further. We do, if something is very questionable, we do not put the scientific name. That's too easy to Google. We hide it behind an E number. That's going to be an E and then a random number that the thing in question corresponds to. And so the E number of this dried up, crushed up beetle is E120. But since you all don't live in Europe, just Google carmine, for example, and you'll find it in a lot of food products, a lot of cosmetics, and your clothing. Now some of these pigments, these ones right here, as you can see, I cannot even lift up the cover. These were deadly. They were very toxic, very poisonous, and these were the 4 deadly pigments that Rembrandt himself worked with. I'm going to quickly mention one, lead white. So Rembrandt, the master of the chiaroscuro, the play with light and dark, used bone black, I'll hold up, and white, even literally all of his paintings. Now what is lead white? These four all have one thing in common, and that's that they're heavy metals. Heavy metals are very dangerous to your bodies. This is lead. This lead becomes a lot more dangerous when it heats up. Then it's going to free up a lot of fumes. We're going to inhale it. It likes to sit. It doesn't leave our body. It likes to sit in your liver, and you can get all kinds of nasty illnesses. One of them being cancer, for example. So these 4 pigments were very deadly, very dangerous to work with. Now in the 17th century, we didn't know any better, and lead was literally everywhere. It was inside of our walls in the form of tubes, which made a lot of men infertile. It was on top of our walls in the form of paint. We have it here as well, it's double glass, but on the outside is lead in glass. Now you look at this powder, and you probably think, you could probably put it on your face. Now if you think that, I'm sorry, it's very dangerous. But in the 17th century, women, they would use it as a makeup. Think about ancient China in the Qing dynasty. Think about ancient Japan, the geishas.
Yeah.
They would also use lead white to mask up their faces. And a little bit more nearby Europe, Queen Elizabeth I, also a woman who would use lead white on top of her skin. Now we are basically very large, talking, thinking, walking sponges. Everything we put on our skin, we will start to absorb. And you can imagine how fast your health will deteriorate after putting such a deadly element on top of your skin. Now to make matters a little worse for women in the 17th century, the reason that they use lead white, it's a metal, it gets stiff. So it will keep your face tight, which is a good thing. Who doesn't want tight skin? Now eventually they would keep this makeup for weeks upon a time, right? Now eventually they would need to remove this makeup with a makeup removal. And the makeup removal wasn't very safe either. It was a mixture of rose water, which is pretty tame, and mercury, which mercury is another heavy metal. And so they would use mercury to wipe off the lead, which is
all the fun stuff.
Yeah, not very Now, to quickly go over the other ones, we've got lead in yellow, we've got arsenic sulfide, and we've got a mercury sulfide. So they're all very, very deadly. Now I want to take you upstairs. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Where's a good place to stand for this?
Yeah, anywhere really.
Anywhere,
We just,
okay.
I heard something about cracking, so I want to show you something. Where's the window?
Very cool. Very cool.
Okay.
Oh, the etching tools, huh?
All right, so I actually heard someone already mentioned, and those are the some original places that Rembrandt himself worked on behind there. But I wanted to show you something because you already mentioned that we actually do not print from the original ones anymore. Very important reason. We have an etching, so this is from a replica, but even the replicas, they wear out. This is an impression of a replica of one of Rembrandt's collection, the windmill. Now you can see when you clean off all of the ink, you get a very nice and clean finish. And the reason that we actually do not print from them anymore, copper is a very soft metal, and so it's very vulnerable to cracking after heating up it so many times, after applying ink and then exposing it to pressure. That you can do something which is called a plate tone. So remove less ink, which gives it more of a dramatic effect. Now when you give this dramatic effect, or when you leave a plate tone, you will also start to expose the kinks of your etching. You can see a lot of cracks, a lot of impurities, kind of, right, on the sides of this plate, which definitely were not on the original one, but this is just wear and tear of your plate. Now if you do this so many times, then those cracks will eventually start to take over your impression or your etch plate, and that just would be a waste, which is why we don't do it. I often get the question, what happens when how many times can you actually print an etch plate? You can only print it once before you have to ink it up again. If you do it immediately after without inking up your plate, you get something which we call a ghost plate, which looks like this.
Oh.
And so it still prints, it's a lot less detailed, and yeah, it literally looks like a ghost print, which is why we also call it a ghost print. Now we have a few, so this is where this is not the original place where Rembrandt created his etchings. The original place where the timeline was. Now you've seen how small that room is, and we couldn't do demonstrations anymore because it would get too crowded and too hot, which is why we moved the etch room upstairs. Now you see 3 different needles. I'm actually going to quickly pull out to make it a little bit more clear. We have 3 different needles. These are different techniques on etching. So we have these 3 needles that represent different techniques. We have the burin, this is the engraving needle. And the engraving needle really was a craft, right? So the engraving needle was also used by jewelers to engrave names into rings and jewelry, for example. Now Rembrandt, unfortunately, wasn't as skilled with the burin or the engraving technique. But what he would do, and the reason why you want to use an engraving technique, in order to use it, let me quickly pull out a copy of the 3 threes. Rembrandt actually applied all 3 different techniques into this one, which was quite impressive. But not in all equal manners, however. We have, right here. We have an impression right here as well. And we see these diagonal lines over on this side. And a good thing to know is they will always be flipped. When I hold them side by side, you can see that the
mirror image.
trees are on different sides. And so your etch plate will always be your negative, and then your etching or your copy will always be your positive. So they literally will be flipped. Why is this important to know? If you ever want to try out etching for yourself and you want to write down a name, a signature, a number, date of birth, date of creation, maybe even your favorite number, you have to mirror everything. So even your signature has to be mirrored, otherwise it's going to be flipped around on the original or on the result, which is going to be very hard to read. Now again, back to the engraving technique. How would you actually use this? You would lay it. It has 2 sides. It has a flat side. It has a nice and a V-shaped tip sloping down. Now you lay it flat side down on top of your copper plate. In a very controlled manner, you kind of dig or cut into your plate, and in a very controlled manner, you dig out the copper this way, right? So if I were to apply a whole lot more pressure, I'd quite literally be cutting in the copper plate, and when I create this motion right here, I'd push the copper out, creating very tiny copper curls or copper shavings on the top side of the slope. Now, due to the resistance of the slope, and if you weren't very skilled at it, you would only get very straight, very controlled lines. The lines in the middle right here. Again, very straight, very controlled, very deep lines, V-shaped lines, with very sharp and tapered ends of it. Now the second technique is known as the dry point needle technique. This right here is a dry point needle. The dry point needle could be any kind of metal needle as long as it was harder than the metal that you were working on. Very easy to do. Copper is a very soft metal, right? It just needed to have a very sharp point. Now out of the 3 techniques, this one right here was the most aggressive. Why was this so aggressive? In order for me to get lines with this needle, I had to scratch directly into the copper plate. And instead of pushing the copper out, this needle would push the copper to the side, creating kind of brambles. Now these brambles are very sharp, tiny edges alongside the lines. And these brambles were the perfect place for ink to kind of flow into and to keep sitting into. And so we get a vastly different line when we use this dry point needle. We get a very soft, a very velvety, a lot more of a kind of feathery line, a whole lot more expressive, right? The lines on your right hand side. And then we have the etching technique itself. So this right here would be your etching needle. Now with the etching technique, you would do it just a little different. With the etching technique, we would apply an etch ground on top of your etch plate beforehand. Now this etch ground was created out of these 3 components. We've got bitumen. This is the black powder right here. If you are unfamiliar with bitumen, it kind of is the little brother or sister to tar. So nowadays bitumen holds asphalt roads together. Then we've got beeswax. So wax from cute little bees. And then we've got resin from a tree. This is from a pine tree. So melt them down, combine them together, and then you'll have your edge ground. Now this is going to be very easy because now when I want to create lines, I'm not going directly into the metal plate anymore. I'm just removing the top layer of that very soft etching ground. Now, as you probably already noticed, since I only removed that top layer, so there's a lot more mobility in here and a lot more room for error. If I made a mistake, I could just fill it up with edge ground and I can start again. Now, as you can see, these lines right here are definitely not deep enough for ink to be able to flow into. And so if we are using this etching technique, we would need to apply a final step, which involves a whole lot more beeswax and creating an airtight bucket out of this beeswax, and then filling it up with an acid. Now the acid that was used is known as nitric acid, and nitric acid is aggressive enough to bite directly into a copper plate, but it would not be able to bite away this edge ground. So everywhere where this edge ground is, that will be protected, and everywhere where we've drawn these lines exposing the copper, these were the parts that will be bitten into. Now, I see that my colleague is coming in.
Ja.
Ik ga naar daar. Alright, so we have to do a quick switch again. So these are all copies that we created for the demonstrations. Let's put this here really quick. And
Dan ben je tijd houden, hè?
huh?
Dan ben je tijd houden.
Ja, ik moet ook net wachten op andere mensen.
Okay, well, give a room so they can walk into this space.
So this is the old school kind of press how the plate would go through, and then pull that down, the pressure that would go onto the plate. That's what that this is great.
Alright. That was consistent there. So, that was already mentioned before that Rembrandt was not only a painter, not only a dealer of art, collector, he was also a master himself. And so he had students working for him too. And these students would do most of the laborious work, so creating paint, for example, right? And creating paint for him. And Rembrandt's school, you could actually just see as a post-academic university or school. He wouldn't teach new people or people new to art. He would usually teach people who already went into an apprenticeship with someone else and then wanted to be taught by Rembrandt, because Rembrandt became so famous for his own specific style. And because of that, Rembrandt didn't teach everyone the exact same thing. He would just have probably an intake talk with you, and he would ask you, what in my art interests you the most? Is it the many portraits that I've created? Then he would put you in this corner right here, which you can see there's a mirror hanging, and then you would start to paint yourself or draw yourself. Is it the copying work? So nowadays we're very lucky, we have a literal copy machine, things go in and out. Back then we didn't have that advanced technology, so if you wanted to copy, you had to create everything yourself. Was it the painting or maybe the drawing? And that's why his working studio for his students was divided in a few different sections too. Now some of Rembrandt's students became way more successful than Rembrandt himself did. One of those students, for example, would be Ferdinand Bol. Ferdinand Bol acquired a lot more wealth, became way more successful, and he kept his wealth too. He eventually went to live at somewhere near the canals in Amsterdam, which is a beautiful house, which is now a museum too, but for a different family. And Rembrandt, of course, he went into bankruptcy. He had to sell this house, all of his belongings, and he went to live at the Rozengracht near the Jordaan, which used to be the poor neighborhood of Amsterdam. Nowadays, it's a very good neighborhood to live in, literally inside of the city, so it's going to be very expensive too. But back then, just rentals. And so Rembrandt, instead of buying a house, he went into a rental, and he lived the rest of his days in that rental too. Now I want to take you one room upstairs, and then there are some benches that you can sit on.
Sit here?
You guys have a long day ahead of you? Or
till 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The very last thing that I want to tell you. After Rembrandt had to sell his house, it was sold to other people to live here, right? So this house probably looked a whole lot different than it looks right now. Now, the reason that we know that every room was used for that specific purpose, and the reason that we know what he had in his antiquity room or his collection room, and the reason why we just know what this house would look like was, first of all, he made many paintings and drawings, and then we could take inspiration from that. And this very specific piece of document right next to me, this was a very important document for a museum as us. This right here was everything that he had to sell, right? So he filed for bankruptcy, so someone from the government went with Rembrandt inside of his house, and in every single room, they would write down very accurately what he had in his possession and what that room was meant for. And very sad for Rembrandt because he would lose everything, but again, very beautiful for a museum like us because we still have this document and we can just read what was inside every single room, and we could draw what that room, the purpose of that room was from. And so this is a copy, this is not the original one. The original one is in possession of the government of Amsterdam. And Rembrandt's section isn't as beautiful in the middle as displayed right here, it's more on the other sides. But thanks to this document and thanks to the many paintings, etchings and drawings that he created, we know exactly what this house looks like, and we recreated it the way that Rembrandt used to live in. Now this is going to be the end of the tour. I know that you guys have to catch a bus in 15 minutes.
That's right.
And so if you have any more questions, now is the time. No? Then I want to thank all of you and hope that you really enjoyed our house. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
Are you going to do anything else after this? I heard
We're going to the Rijksmuseum to see the Nachtwacht.
Yeah, so the Nachtwacht, good thing to know. I forgot my tablet somewhere, but along the way.
It's in the etching room.
Okay,
on the counter.
The Nachtwacht, if you see it for the first time, it's huge, it's gigantic. But keep in mind that the Nachtwacht used to be even larger. It was actually created for the people of the Nacht, the kind of police guards of the 17th century who would keep the safety inside of the Amsterdam. And so they placed the Nachtwacht in their meeting room. Eventually the Nachtwacht went to the Paleis op de Dam, and they wanted the Nachtwacht on a very specific spot. There was a huge door over on this side, a huge door over on that side, and they wanted the painting to fit in between. Now the Nachtwacht, it was way too huge, way too large. So what did they do? They cut off both on the sides, and so that they could fit in the middle. Now, so when you look at the Nachtwacht, this is not the original state, this is the cut-off state. So when you are impressed on how large it is, it used to be even larger.
Don't do that on your Peter Max paintings.
Oh my goodness.
And there's also a little joke that Rembrandt put in there. You'll see, so they're all armed men, right? Armed men, they all have rifles or weapons, swords. And there's one little girl who really does not fit in that painting. She wasn't originally within the Nachtwacht. Rembrandt saw this little girl outside in a beautiful white little dress. But since everyone was armed inside of that painting, he gave her arms as well. So everyone has a weapon, and that weapon in Dutch we call a klauw, which is a claw, right? So claws. And that is your weapon that we used to call our weapons, so just claws. That little girl has not a weapon because she's way too young to have a weapon, but she has a chicken on her side. And what do chickens have? They have
Beaks.
claws.
Oh,
So
wow.
Rembrandt also weaponed her with a chicken instead of a
Oh
woman.
my goodness.
And it's a nice thing to see as well. And then I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the Rijksmuseum too.
Thank you. Very good job. Very good job.
We exit down that way,
Yes,
correct? Yeah.
There is an elevator there, so if you do not want to take the stairs downstairs, you can take the elevator.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Amanda.
How many floors did we go up? I didn't even count.
4.
Okay.
Or actually 3. That is the 4th floor, but it's inaccessible.
Okay.
We went up 3 floors.
All right. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Very much welcome. I hope you're, is it
My mom.
your mom
Yeah.
enjoys it too?
Thank you. Yes.
So this is groep 2.
Yeah.
We are waiting outside and we are
Okay.
ready to go. We have to be at 10 at the bus.
All right. Is my mom downstairs or
Your
outside?
mother I already sent a bit.
All right. Thank
You
you.
have a coat downstairs?
No.
I sent her with more people. She's not alone. So she's walking towards the bus.
Okay. All
Straight line to the right, and I follow you.
right. Thank you.
I said that it was better because we have to be in time. But
Straight down the right. Watch out, watch out. They don't stop.
Die chauffeur die belt mij dan.
Wow, my nuts are kind of raw. I don't like... I'm recording great. Yeah, I don't see bus 2 anywhere.
Uh-oh.
She said go straight down right, but...
To the right?
No, right out of there and then straight.
What she said?
There's bus 1.
Where?
Leaving.
Yeah.
Well, she's back
Down
there
here,
anyway,
across
so.
That's what we did, right?
She's still back there. We crossed another street here, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was over here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the crowd over there.
Because she also said they have to move the bus every few moments. They
Oh,
can't leave it
okay,
sit very long,
okay.
so It'll sit there for a little bit and then it has to be moved.
I saw my mom got there okay.
Well, that's why they let some of them go first.
Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta go across the street over there.
Yeah, let's hurry.
All right, thank you.
I know it's confusing. I can see why they give you the little thing. No, that's for bicycles. Oh, hurry.
Running man.
Yeah, hurry, hurry.
Well, yeah, see the green there? See the green there?
You gotta get away, you know?
bikes will stop.
Oh, I don't think so.
Pause when you're doing stuff.
Yeah.
Well, no, the bike's coming really
Bike's not
fast.
gonna hit you.
Well,
It's gonna be hit you.
we're gonna be sitting there squatting.
We'll be pissed too.
No, we'll be bloodied up.
Hey, free souvenir.
No thanks.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording now.